The astrology for the week of May 5th through May 11th, 2025 marks a relatively quiet period in an otherwise eventful year. A time to stabilize and recover in preparation for the challenges and opportunities to come. Mars is finally getting some distance from the polarizing opposition with Pluto in Aquarius, while Venus in Aries is giving Mars hungry eyes from across the crowd at the Andrew WK concert. Mercury is wrapping up its wicked guitar solo in Aries to settle into a slower, heavier, more deliberate groove. We're not in final decision mode quite yet, but we find ourselves somewhere in between the initial rush of desire and the part where we realize what's actually worth the effort of following through on. This week is less about flashy breakthroughs and more about sorting through options, managing expectations, and testing whether the spark can catch onto something with enough substance to keep us warm through the night. Hello everybody, I'm Kyle Pierce. I'm going to be going over the astrology for the week of May 5th, 2025 through May 11th, 2025. I'll be going through each day of the week in detail so you know what to expect for your week ahead. But before I do that, let's go through the weekly overview. On Monday, we start the week off with Mercury in Aries completing a sextile with Jupiter in Gemini. However, the moon will be almost but not quite void of course throughout Monday and most of Tuesday, which might make things a little quieter than usual. On Tuesday, the moon will be in Virgo with the South Node, while Mars is in Leo, being applied to by a trine from Venus in Aries. Wednesday, Mercury will be in the later degrees of Aries, separating from that sextile with Jupiter, while the moon in Virgo completes a conjunction with the South Node. Thursday, the moon will enter Libra, while Jupiter is in Gemini at about 22 degrees. While on Friday, the day of Venus, Venus will be in Aries, about to enter a part of Aries that is considered to be the bound or term of Venus, as she also applies to that trine with Mars, slowly picking up some speed. Saturday, we'll be looking at Saturn, now in the last degrees of Pisces, in its own bound as well, while Mercury will wrap up its time in Aries and ingress into Taurus, shortly after which the moon will enter Scorpio and begin approaching the full moon in Scorpio, which we won't get until Monday next week. And then on Sunday, we have the sun in Taurus beginning to approach a conjunction with Uranus. So you may notice that not a lot of aspects are completing this week, which can make things seem a little more uneventful than usual, which isn't such a bad thing. In fact, it can be a little nice when we're in a year like the one that we're in right now. So with that, let's jump into the week ahead, starting with Monday. Some astrologers look at a void of course moon, or they call a moon void of course when it is not going to complete any more aspects to any other planets before it reaches the end of the sign. More traditionally, a moon is considered void of course when it is not going to complete any aspects for the next up to 30 degrees is the widest ranging definition. And while I wouldn't say that the moon is void of course, technically speaking, for the day, the moon isn't going to be completing any aspects, which is telling us something. The moon will be in Leo throughout the first half of the day or so, and then it will switch signs over to Virgo right around the fixed star Regulus. And the funny thing about Regulus is that it does have a way of bringing people into visibility. It tends to make people more prominent or speak to more prominent people. It tends to be a good mood booster too. Mood booster. It tends to engender confidence and a certain self-assuredness, which can be very stabilizing to the personality. You know, we can get megalomaniacs as well. But for our purposes, for just looking at, our experience of the moon for the day, we have a moon that is speaking to maybe a desire to be more prominent or to be seen more visibly, feeling like we're not being seen. We're not really getting the attention that we're looking for. We're not getting the connections that we're looking for. The moon isn't making any connections today. So it's kind of off doing its own thing. It's maybe you could say in the void. So we might look at Monday as kind of a quiet day where we're maybe focusing more on ourselves. Maybe we need to give ourselves a certain amount of attention that we're not getting outside. And maybe we will find that if we look to ourselves, that we're able to identify the source of that need. Why do you need attention? Is it because you're seeking validation for how amazing you are? Well, I'm here to tell you as yourself that you are just perfectly amazing the way you are. So on Tuesday, we get some parallels with Monday. We're still in kind of a quiet space. We're not seeing as much materialize maybe as we normally would. We are maybe trying to optimize parts of our day. We're maybe a little more focused on the granular with the moon in Virgo, but also with Mars in Leo, we're starting to come off of this opposition with Pluto. So we're feeling like there's less getting in our way. Even if it was only a tiny thing that you blew out of proportion, right? That felt like was in your way, that is starting to clear, and Mars is being applied to by Venus. So we're getting some of that competitive edge back. We're not feeling as obstructed in what we're trying to do. And perhaps we're maybe starting to feel ourselves a little bit. We're starting to feel like we can compete. Feel like we can bring more to the table than maybe we've been able to in the past. And that pressure to perform maybe is starting to feel a little more fun. I think this is, while not an especially eventful day, because the moon is not really making any aspects until later on in the evening, which would be a trine with the sun. This is kind of it's a good day to kind of hype yourself up for events ahead, to maybe start putting in the work, the behind the scenes work that is required to accomplish the kinds of things that you're hoping to accomplish, to see your dreams or illusion of grandeur realized in the world. There's actually a lot of work that goes into that. So maybe we need to exercise, we need to get a little stronger, or we need to exercise some non-physical muscles, such as our charisma. So Wednesday, we get an oddly significant amount of focus on Mercury. Despite it being kind of doing its own thing at this point, it's separated from a sextile from Jupiter, though it's still relevant. However, we have Jupiter still in Gemini, ruled by Mercury, and we have the moon in Virgo applying to a conjunction with the South Node, also a Mercury-ruled sign. On Wednesday, we're potentially honing in on details and maybe letting go of some old mental clutter. Mercury at the end of Aries is like the last burst of fiery thought before it settles in Taurus. This is kind of like throwing spaghetti at the wall, seeing what sticks, seeing what resonates. This last part of Aries really has a penchant for drawing on ideas or finding words that move people to action, that inspire people, get people fired up or excited, or want to participate in something. So maybe, throughout Mercury's time in Aries, we've accumulated a lot of mental spaghetti that we need to throw at the wall and see what sticks, what lands, what resonates. And so Jupiter at the end of Gemini, where we're really being asked to make decisions about, which ideas we're going to put into action, realizing that we can't put all of them into action. And paired with the moon in Virgo, which gives us this maybe the more detail orientation, maybe looking at ideas which, get us excited, that we get kind of pumped about, but taking on a cooler, more detached look at those ideas. Will that really work? Is that really worth doing? Do I, want to put in the effort that's required? Is it, going to get the results that I'm hoping that it will be? And will it be worth the effort that I invest into it? So we might be able to let go of some of our attachment to some of these schemes or ways of looking at things that might help declutter our agenda, declutter our minds, and help us move into Mercury and Taurus operating a little leaner than we normally would. So we're not trying to oversow our fields, if you will, or trying to tackle more than is actually possible to do. So on Thursday, we have the moon in Libra, and it will be applying to an opposition with Venus, it's the planet that rules Libra. And then we have the moon applying to a sextile with Mars, which is really activating that trine that's building up between Venus and Mars. So we're potentially feeling maybe some motivation to get out, socialize, explore what options might be available to us, perhaps with the emphasis on Jupiter today, as we're maybe being asked to call the herd of ideas and possibilities that we've been entertaining. Maybe we have a long, endless inbox full of Tinder date requests. I don't know. And now we're maybe trying to narrow things down to the best prospects. So with the emphasis on this relating and this exploration, we're maybe feeling a little bit jazzed about the opportunities available to us. We may feel like there's more opportunity than there is time to actually explore all of them. So it might be a good day to message a few of the potential Tinder dates that you've narrowed down. Or maybe you've been putting yourself out there a little bit in the job market. Maybe you've put your resume out to a few people, and maybe you're getting some responses. You're getting people entertaining you as a prospect. This is a good time to, again, assess what your options are and pay attention to the one that gets you the most revved up, but also try engaging with it a little bit. Maybe take it for a test run. Maybe exchange a few emails between some of these prospects and see which one has both the enthusiasm factor, but also it looks promising in terms of bearing long-term fruit. And as we move into Friday, we get extra emphasis once again on this Mars-Venus trine. That's still building, but as Venus begins to pick up speed, we're feeling maybe a sense of anticipation that something exciting might be coming into view. Maybe one of the options that we've been exploring throughout the week or earlier in the week might be resulting in an actual date or in a job interview in the looming future. So we might want to lean into the pep in your step you're feeling, or the confidence, the enthusiasm that is growing as we build towards the possible realization of something that we're excited about, a possible interaction. There's a bit of a tension that we want to manage between, our raw, unfiltered self and, rules of social etiquette. We do want to be our raw, authentic self, right? That is who we want to show up as. We want people to accept us for our most selfie self, right? But we still have to obey the laws of civilization and society. And like you would on any date, you kind of want to bring your best self forward. You want to bring your most civilized and socially balanced self to the table. So just bear that in mind as you go on your adventures on Friday. As we get into Saturday, this has kind of the flavor of the morning after, maybe. This could be the walk of shame after the wild night that you had yesterday. As we're dealing with Saturn's day, we're getting a little bit of the wake up to reality that we often get. We get to see what we actually have to do. Do we get to lounge and relax this weekend, or do we still have messes to clean up from the week before? And with the emphasis on Saturn wrapping up its time in Pisces, entering the last degree here very soon, we get perhaps a a taste of what we were initially enthusiastic about earlier in the week, and we maybe get to see what it actually looks like without our beer goggles on, or we get to see some evidence of what that really is. And maybe it's something really cool. Maybe it's something that you want to continue to cultivate and grow in your life, or maybe it's not. As the day progresses, we are getting a shift from Mercury in Aries to Mercury in Taurus. Mercury's going to change signs about midday, and shortly afterwards, the moon will change signs from Libra to Scorpio, which again sort of emphasizes this the hangover after the party, right? And it can point to maybe a difference between what we were told something would be like and how we're reacting to it emotionally. Sometimes when the moon is in Scorpio, there's a tendency to have feelings that grow beyond the normal range of emotional experience. Sometimes when the moon is in Scorpio, there's an echo chamber effect with our emotions internally, where maybe something got us excited and it bounced off some other things inside us, and it built up and we got really excited about it, and maybe we took things a little too far. Or maybe the reverse happened, where somebody said something to us, kind of hurt our feelings, made us feel a little insecure, and that rebounded off some old trauma that bounced around and grew bigger than what it normally would be. Yet kind of compounding interest when it comes to the moon in Scorpio with the inner landscape. So noting that it can be useful for making subtle things internally louder so that we hear them more, but also just because they're louder doesn't mean that they're as big or painful or difficult as they feel like in the moment. They're crying to get our attention, not necessarily because they're in desperate, dire straits. So, listen to those things, but don't necessarily overreact when it comes to assessing whether or not your hot date of last night was something that you want to see grow and bloom in the future. Pay attention to the subtle things, but don't let them distort your vision too much. Don't blow things out of proportion when it comes to judging how different things made us feel. So on Sunday, we bring our focus in on the sun, what the sun's doing. It's Sunday, right? We have the sun in Taurus. It is not quite there, but it is approaching a conjunction with Uranus. And in Taurus, we're trying to stabilize things. We're trying to secure, what we've established against things that might destabilize what we've established. We want to keep things going. We want to focus on what's good and keep it going, make it sustainable. As we approach Uranus, we get an inherent sort of threat to our stability, to the continuity of what we're trying to do. And sometimes that can come from outside, and sometimes that can come from inside as well. Sometimes we get a new idea. We get, like a jolt of enthusiasm about a way to tweak or augment what we've been doing. And that can be great, right? We like to tweak and optimize things. We like to improve, but we want to pay attention to what might actually be very radical, what might actually be such a significant change that it destabilizes what we have going on and undermines it, right? And I think this gets emphasized as we approach the full moon in Scorpio, which we'll talk a bit more about next week. It marks the full moon that we get in every Taurus season, which, as full moons do, they represent both a counterpoint and a full bloom of that season's potential. Often what comes to my mind with the moon in Scorpio full moon is the potential to gorge oneself on the fruits of their labors, or the seeing how much has actually come into fruition, seeing all the potential to indulge in all the deliciousness, the sensual experiences that life has to offer, and potentially overdoing it, right? And it's a good way to destabilize ourselves, and not always in big ways, but you go on a bender one weekend, right? And that's fine, right? You indulge, you had a little bit of fun, but maybe you're hungover on Monday and it interferes with your ability to work. So you kind of slack that day, and then you have extra work to do the next day, or you end up staying up late Monday trying to catch up, and then you don't get enough sleep, and then you're tired again on Tuesday, and you can kind of spiral in that direction. So try to be moderate in the way you indulge over the weekend. There may be much to indulge in, but we definitely don't want to ruin ourselves for the week ahead, because while this is one of the more stable and peaceful periods of the year, we want to use that period to make ourselves stronger, make ourselves more resilient for the rest of the year, right? All right, with that, we'll call it a week. Thanks so much for watching. Keep an eye out for a deep dive into Saturn and Aries, which will be coming out hopefully in the next week or so. And if you have any questions about Saturn and Aries specifically, maybe you're going through a Saturn return, maybe your first, maybe your second, maybe your third, let me know. Let me know in the comments. You can shoot me an email at kylepierceastrologer@gmail.com as well, and I will do my best to address your questions in that video. Finally, I do still have some availability this month before I go out of town. So yeah, you can book a reading with me at kylepierceastrologer.com, and have a great week. See you next time.